Hi everyone, my name is Mark Moikins from Big Mountain Studio, and today I'm in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Thanks for watching my channel, and I hope you enjoy my next video. Hi everyone, my name is Mark Moikins from Big Mountain Studio, and today we're going to learn about masks, and we're going to apply a mask to an image so it changes the shape of the image itself. So you might be asking yourself, well, what is a mask? What exactly is that, and how does it work? Well, take a look at this image. According to Apple, an image mask is a bitmap that specifies an area to paint, but not the color. In effect, an image mask acts as a stencil to specify where to place color on the page. So that's what an image mask is, and you can use them to basically change the shape of your images to whatever you want. You can make your image a circle, a diamond, a star, or in our case, what we're going to do is we're going to take a popular logo and use that logo's outline to mask an image. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. Okay, this is what it looks like. Here we're using Jason Chen's picture. Jason Chen, if you don't know who he is, well, I held a contest and he contributed a lot to my channel by doing translations. So he translated almost all of my videos, the titles and the descriptions. He translated almost all of them, if not all of them. Then we had a random drawing, and he won. So I'm using his picture. That was the prize, was to use the winner's picture in an upcoming video. So I'm using his picture to mask with and if you don't recognize that outline, that logo, that is a PayPal logo. And this is what we're going to build. Now, it's going to be kind of like 3 steps. First, I'm going to show you the easiest way to mask an image through code. And then what we'll do is we'll take that code and we'll make a designable with it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a 3rd step and we're going to enable that shadow to appear around the masked image, which is a lot harder than it sounds. I thought this was going to be easy, but it's actually very difficult, as you'll see. But I'm going to walk you through it step by step, so you'll understand it and it'll be easy as you watch it. Okay, let's get started. Here we have a project with Jason's picture, and this is just an image view. As you can see over here in the document outline, it's just an image view. There isn't any mask on it right now. So we're going to start by masking Jason's image here in code. So let's go to our view controller. And here all we have is an outlet for that image view, profile image view. So how are we going to mask this image? Well, the easiest way is to use the mask property on the image view itself. So let's take a look at that. Okay, there's the property right there. An optional view whose alpha channel is used to mask a view's content. What that means is that alpha basically describes what can be seen and what can't be seen. So the mask that you use, whatever can be seen on your mask, will be used against the image, and that's the part of the image that you'll see. Okay, now if you look at this, let's look at it again. Okay, let's look over here. It is expecting a UI view. Well, okay, that's fine. One of the things that is also a UI view is another image. So what we can do is create a variable that has an existing image that I already have in my asset catalog. So I'm going to create a UIimageview because that is a UI view. Like if you actually go into UIimageview, hold down Command and then click on it, you'll notice it implements or inherits from UIview. So that'll work for this property, this mask property. And I already have an image, so I'm going to use this initializer right here. And I'm going to use the PayPal mask. That's the image I'm going to use. And then for my mask, I'm just going to set it like this. Okay, let's see what that looks like. There you go. So that's pretty easy, right? Now notice there's no shadow because we haven't added that yet. And really with that code, that could really just be one line of code. So you can see how simple it is to apply an image mask. But what we're going to do now is we're going to create a designable. So what I can do on my storyboard, what I want to do is be able to just change a property or specify my image mask through a property. So I'm going to create a designable to do that. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to subclass UIImageView. And what that means, subclassing means, is you're taking something that already exists, something that's already built, and you're adding additional functionality on top of it. And that's what I'm doing. I'm going to subclass the UIImageView and add another property to it where I can specify my mask. And for the name, I'll just call it UIImageView with mask. But you can call it whatever you want. Just create it right here. Okay, there you go. So we have our class here. And what I want to do too is when I set the mask on the storyboard, I actually want to see it render right on the storyboard. And you can do that, but what you have to do is you have to change your class a little bit. So we have to add some attributes here, a class attribute called interface builder designable, just like that. And then we want a property to show up in the attributes inspector. So we have to use another property attribute called IB inspectable. And it will be a type of UI image. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a question mark on it because I want to make it optional, meaning it doesn't necessarily have to have a UI image to still work. And then when I set that property, so here I'm using a didSet function. So when I set it, this code is going to run right here. And I want to take that image and I actually want to put it into an image view. Because remember, the mask property takes a UI view, and a UI image view can work as a UI view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another variable up here and call it mask image view. And it will be a type of UI image view. Okay, and then when I come down here, basically what I'm going to do is this is going to be the mask that I'm going to use for this UI image view. But you know what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to instantiate that UI image view right here. So it's going to exist whether I need it or not. So then when I set an image to this property, what I want to do is set the image to my mask. So I'll say mask image view dot image equals my mask image. Like that. Okay, now once that is set, I want to actually apply this mask to the image view itself. So what I'm going to do is say mask equals mask image view. Okay, so what is this property here? Well, this is actually just the property of the class itself. It's sort of like saying the same thing as this. Well, it's exactly like saying that, but I don't really need the self here. So I'm kind of like a minimalist, and I usually take out the self if I don't need it. This code right here, the mask equals mask image view, is basically the same code as in our view controller right here. Mask, but I'm just using this portion right here. Okay, so let's go back and let's test this. And in order to test it, I'm just going to go back to the view controller and I'm going to comment this out. And let's go to the storyboard. Let's take this image. We want this image now, this UI image view, to use our designable. And it'll show up right here. Okay, let it update for a little bit, then come back here. And now we see a new property, mask image. And that's our property that we created. So let's apply the PayPal mask. Okay, it's not working. Why isn't it working? Well, when you supply an image view for your mask, you have to tell it what size you want it to be as well. Because if you don't give it any dimensions, it's going to be super small and invisible, basically. It's way up here in the corner. So it's applying a very tiny mask and you can't see any of the image. So let's correct that. Okay, so we have our mask image view. And what we want to do is take the mask image view and set its frame so it is equal to the bounds of this image. Okay, so basically what's happening here is it's making the dimensions, you know, the height and the width, the same as this image right here by accessing its bounds property. Now I don't want to use frame. Like I could do this, but I don't want to do that because what happens is, let's take a look at our storyboard again. And let's take a look at the image. Okay, take a look at this. We'll fix this after. This is an example of what's happening. Now these coordinates right here, these 4 coordinates, this is the frame. And you notice the X starts at 103 and the Y starts at 103. So our mask is using the same X and Y coordinates as the image itself. So starting at this point right here, it's going 103 over and 28 down, and that's where your mask starts. That is not what we want. We actually want the mask to be 0, 0. So it starts up here at the upper left-hand corner. So that's why I use bounds, because bounds never has an X and Y coordinate. It's always 0, 0. So let's change that back to bounds. Okay, now let's take a look at it. Wait for that to update. There we go. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. Now you have something reusable. You can use this in your projects, and you can just, add this file to any of your projects, and right on the storyboard, you can just access that property in the attributes inspector and change it to any mask you want. And notice I have another mask here that I can show you, like an apple. So we could also do that. So this is a fun way to be able to use your own logo if you have your own logo, and if you have pictures that are being displayed or profile pictures that are being displayed in your app. This is a fun way to do it, where you can apply your own logo and use it as a mask, or you can use any other mask. Okay, time for step 3. And at this point, you can stop the video. You've already learned 2 different ways to apply a mask, and that might be good enough. But now you want to apply a shadow, and if that's something you want to do in your application, I wanted to apply a shadow to give it more depth, to give the image more depth on the screen. Maybe you don't want to do that, but if you want to do that, keep watching. It's a little bit longer process. So maybe you can watch it at 2x speed. Watch this video at 2x speed to speed it up a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the designable that we already have, but we're going to have to shift it around a little bit, because basically here's what's going to happen. There's going to be different layers in our image. The top layer is going to be the image here of Jason, and then it's going to have another layer that is basically going to be your mask that cuts it out. And so that's one image right there, the masked image. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add another layer to it, which is the mask again, and then we're going to add a shadow to the mask. So think of it as like 2 images, really. You have the masked image, and then you have the mask again, but with a shadow on it. So that's what we're going to do. And in order to do this, we're going to have to turn some things around a little bit. Now notice, when you have an image view, well, let's select that here. Okay, notice when you have an image view, you define your image, and here we have an option to define the mask image. We're going to have to switch those around. The image that we're going to be selecting is actually going to be the mask. And instead of a mask image, this is the image to be masked. So this will be the image of Jason Chen, and then we're going to start out with the image of your mask, basically. So it's going to be kind of backwards, right? Now this, of course, it doesn't look like anything, but you'll see why we have to switch these 2 things around. Okay, so let's get started. Let's go back to our inspectable here. Or not our inspectable, our designable. And the first thing we want to do is add a property for the shadow opacity. Now, kind of like by default, UI views actually have a shadow. There's just the opacity set to 0. And when you set the opacity to 1, it'll show the shadow. So we need a way to turn it on. Or if you want to adjust the opacity of that shadow, we want to allow the developer to be able to use that. So let's create another IB inspectable. We're going to make it a float, because that is what the property is on the UIImageView. I'll show you in just a second. So we need a did set. So whenever the developer changes the shadow opacity, this code will get run. And when the code gets run, we want to change the shadow opacity on the layer. So that's how you add shadows. Is you don't add it to the UI view itself. You add it to the UI view's layer property. Oh, probably help if I actually use the shadow opacity here. And then we're going to set it to whatever the property is. Okay, So let's go in. Oh, it's giving me a problem here. It doesn't like this because all properties that you add into a class in Swift have to have like an initial value. You can't just have it. Or we could make it nullable or give it a default value. But we're going to give it a default value of 0 because that is normally what it is. That's the default value on the layer. This shadow opacity is 0. Okay, let's look at our main storyboard here. Okay, good. So now you notice this new property, shadow opacity. So when I change that to 1, notice it adds a shadow. It's not really positioned well, which we're going to fix, because by default the shadow opacity is kind of like on top of the UI view or on top of the image. So that's why you see it like this. Okay, this is good. We have a shadow, but we don't have a masked image. So that's the next step, is we have to actually mask the image now using Jason's picture, but we have to do it a different way. So let's go back in here. Okay, now remember before I was telling you that we kind of have 2 layers, right? The top layer is going to be the masked image of Jason, and the bottom layer is going to be the shadowed image, which we already have. So consider this UI image view by default to be the bottom layer. Now what we have to do is we have to create a top layer and add it to the UI image view so it sits up right on top of it and you still have the shadow below it. Now in order to do that, I have this property right here which we will use to hold Jason's image or whatever image you're going to be using to mask. So I'm going to just change this name a little bit so it's more clear. Instead of mask image, I'm going to change it to image to mask. So this is not your mask, but the image you want to mask. In this case, it's Jason's picture, right? Okay. And we also will change this image too. We'll also change the name of this image view. Image to mask view. Okay, good. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I actually want to create another function. I want to call another function here and move some of this code out of there because there's a lot of things I need to do, and so it's just better if I just extract that code out, organize it better. So when they set this property, they give us an image to mask, we're going to call this update view here. And we can delete these things here. And we're going to delete this here. Okay, well, yeah, we'll leave it like that. Now, so what's happening is you apply the image, or what happens is you set the image, and it sets it to this image property. So now we have this image to mask view. So let's work with that. And the first thing I want to do is I want to check to make sure that this image has actually been set. So I'm going to check to see if that is nil or not. Okay, if it doesn't equal nil, then we'll start to create the mask. Okay, so now that we know the image to mask view has an image, now we're going to apply a mask to it. Now before, remember, we use this property right here, mask, right off the UI image view, and it takes a UI view. But in this case, I found that this doesn't work as well when we're doing it this way, when we're going to add it as a subview. I don't know why, but I found actually what looks better and worked better, or actually worked, was to use the layers mask property. And the layer has a property mask, and it works the same way, except it's a little bit different. Here, you notice you can apply, well, for example, a UI view, or in this case, a UI image view, can have many layers. And so one of those layers might have a mask on it. And that's totally okay. So there's a mask on the UI image view, and there's also a mask property on the different layers. So here, we're going to use this one, and notice it's a core animation layer. So remember that type, core animation layer. And we're going to set the property this way. But where's our mask? What's the mask that we're going to use? Well, here is another interesting problem, is we can't use the image that we already have. When I try to use the image of this base class as the mask here it basically I try to do this, right? I say self.layer, and I try to use that as the mask. I think it goes into some kind of recursive process, like an infinite loop, and it never ends. And if you try to like run this or view the storyboard, your Xcode is going to freeze up and crash. So we can't use that. Instead, what we need to do is we actually need to create another UI image view to hold our mask and to use as our mask. So I'm going to do that. Okay, so I'm going to create another property right here, and I'll call it masking image view. And again, we're just going to instantiate it whether we need it or not. Now, before we use it, of course, it doesn't have an image right now. So I'll just finish writing this code here. Masking image view dot layer. Okay, so that's how it's going to work right there. But this doesn't have an image view, and it's not the right size. Remember, we have to make this the right size before we can use it. So we're missing some code here. But I want to give you the basics of how this is going to work. So after we have that, what I'm going to do is call the add subview. And we're going to add the masked image as a subview. And this will go on top of the image. So when you add subviews, they basically, you just stack up views and views and views on top of each other. And that's what this is going to do. So we already have our mask with a shadow that shows. Now we're going to add the actual masked image on top of that shadow. All right, so now we're not finished with this though. This is the basics of how it works. Now what we have to do is make sure that this is the right size, make sure this is the right size, and make sure this actually has an image too, right? Okay, so now that we have this image, we got to make sure it's the right size. And you remember this code? This is what we had before, basically. And there's one other important aspect here too, and that is when we assign this property here, this image that you apply could be a different size than your mask. So we want to make sure that the size of our image and the size of our mask are the same sizes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to change the content mode so it scales it to fit. So basically sizes it down. Scale aspect fit right there. Okay, and basically we're going to do something similar to this masking image view. Now we already have the image, and right here, and this is the image. And remember on the storyboard, the image property, I said we switched them around, right? So this is actually the mask. So when you use this class, you just have to remember that the image property is now your mask, and this property is the image that you want to mask. And then we're going to have to adjust the size too. And for this frame, I'm basically going to make it the same as this one right here. So it's going to use the same property, the bounds property. Okay, one last thing. We want to change the content mode as well. Except this time, what I find works better is if this one is just center. Because usually your mask is the size that you want to use. So just remember that. When you create your mask, make sure it's the size that you actually want it to appear as on your view. And I find that this works really well. Okay, is there anything else? Let's look at this again. So we have our image to mask view, which is the picture of Jason. We set up the size of the picture. We set the content mode so it resizes to the size of whatever your mask is. The size of the mask is basically going to be the same size, its original size, by using center. It just keeps the original size of the mask. We change the frame to the same as the bounds, so now we can expand it out to be the same size as the UI image view, it's bounds. And we set the image. Okay, good. And then we apply that mask, that layer of that mask, to this layer's mask. So now here we have a finished masked image. And once we have that finished masked image, we add it to the UI image view as a subview, so it'll sit right on top of it. Now let's see how it looks. Okay, let's take a look at our properties here, because I'm not seeing anything. Oh, it's because we have an image to mask, and we need to set that to JSON. There it is. Okay, this looks good. We have our mask, and then we have our shadow. But you see, notice the sizes are different, right? So let's fix that. On one other thing too, when you're working with IB designables, if you come here, this is where it actually sets the properties. So some of these properties we don't need anymore. Like we had added this property, but then we changed it from mask image to image to mask. So you can delete that because it's not needed anymore. So just know that whenever you change these properties, these custom properties that you added, it actually adds them to user-defined runtime attributes. So if you change any of these, you might have to come back here and clean these up. Okay, let's find out what's going on here. Because as you notice, the size of your mask is not the same size as this image. So let's see if we can make it the same size. Okay, I found out the problem. And it basically has to do with this right here, the content mode. So for our mask, we're using .center. But what happened is on the storyboard, remember, we want this image right here, PayPal mask, to be the same size, exactly the same size as the mask that you're using at the bottom, the shadowed layer. So this is the problem here, is scale to fit. And it's basically because this image, the bounds here are larger than the actual mask. So let's change this to center as well. There we go, and that fits a lot better. Now notice, by default, that shadow goes up, so it's on the top, and you might want to adjust that shadow. And you can totally do that too. There's properties where you can do that. So instead of writing them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste them in here. Because this tutorial isn't so much about shadows as it is about masks. So I'll just go over these with you real quick. Okay, I added 3 extra properties. I added a way where you can change the color of your shadow, the shadow radius, and that's basically how much the shadow goes out from the image, and then a shadow offset. And what that is, that tells you, that basically allows you to move the shadow around. Like right now, you notice the shadow is up a little bit. Well, we're going to move the shadow so it's more centered. So let's go back to our storyboard. And now we'll see those extra properties. Wait for this to finish compiling here. Okay, so you have shadow offset. Now if we just move these to 0, 0, now you see a more even fill of that shadow, right? You also have shadow radius. I usually don't touch this, but you can increase it and see how the shadow gets bigger. So you can basically increase it to separate it from the layer underneath it. Give it the illusion that it's higher up. All right, guys. So there you go. You learned 3 different ways to apply an image mask. You can simply use the mask property on the image view itself. You can use it in a designable, so you can just change your images class, and then you can just reuse it. And all you have to do is specify what image mask you want to use. And the third way is you can apply a mask to the layer itself by using another layer as your mask. In this way, this allowed us to place a masked image on top of the shadow to create this shadow effect. If you just want to change this mask too, you can change it to like the Apple mask, and then you can see the shadow follows the contour of the apple too. So there you go. Have fun with this. See what else you can do with it. And again, I always welcome suggestions. If you guys find better ways of doing this, this kind of seems like a hack. And I struggled with this for a long time. You wouldn't believe how long I worked with this, trying different options and trying to make it as simple as possible. But I'm always willing to learn. So if you come up with a way, and test it first before you tell me, because sometimes I get suggestions where someone didn't test it and they just say, you can do this, and then I try it and it doesn't work. So make sure you test it, and if it works, then post a comment below. All right, thanks guys. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed learning about how to use image masks and how to apply shadows. Share it with your friends if you want them to learn the same thing that you did. And consider subscribing for more videos like this coming out in the future. And also, if you want to help me out and help out this video and this channel, you can also supply a translation to the title and the description of this video. So if you're watching this video and your native language is different than English, then feel free to supply a title and description in your native language, and it'll make it easier for people in your country to find this video. All right, thanks guys.